Hey everyone, I wanted to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Codemagic. Codemagic is a Flutter developer's favorite continuous integration and delivery tool. It's super easy to get started and they have really awesome documentation. People love that Codemagic supports mobile, web, and desktop and makes code signing and publishing your applications just really, really easy. Recently, Codemagic has included M1 Max in their free tier and also lowered their prices. It's definitely worth considering if you're looking for a CI/CD tool for your next Flutter project. So go ahead and check them out at codemagic.io. That's codemagic.io. Hello, welcome to another episode of Flying High with Flutter. I'm your host, Alan Wyma. Today I'm with Gianfranco Papa, who is the CTO of Somnio Systems, based out of Uruguay, I believe, right?
Yeah, Uruguay. Somnio Software.
Yes, Somnio Software. Welcome. Yeah, I mean, it's good. You actually messaged me about I think a month ago or so, talking about you wanted to come onto the show, and we finally found a good topic for us to bring you on, which is all about DartFrog, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I remember we were talking and discussing interesting topics about Flutter, and yeah, we finally are talking about DartFrog, which is a really hot topic in the Flutter community right now.
I haven't heard many people talking about it. I've heard a couple of people, but not too many. People are still kind of sticking to Flutter itself, from what I
Yeah,
can see at least.
yeah, that's right. And I guess it will be really important in the future because we are seeing like a lot of backend, mainly possibilities, not only frameworks, but possibilities in Dart. So I guess that it will be like really important probably in the next year when we start like getting used to working with Dart in the backend, right? So yeah, maybe it's not like so relevant right now, but I see that it could be really important to try to invest some time in try to test these tools that we have available and try to figure out if it makes sense to start migrating to not only focus on Dart on Flutter, which is awesome, but also try to bet on the full stack of Dart, right?
Let's kind of roll back a bit, right? Because you actually have a very long history with Flutter, is what you were telling me before. When did you actually start getting into Flutter yourself?
Yeah, that's yeah, great point. We were discussing like, okay, so here at my company we work with Flutter since the beta release. So basically, if we go back like a long time ago, I started working with Flutter since the very beginning because I was working with native technologies and it's kind of I don't want to repeat all of the pains that every native developer had, but in Flutter I found like a good technology that allowed me to be really efficient with my time. And also I found like the performance that I was trying to have at that time, right? Because I tested at that time React Native, I wasn't like fully happy with the technology. So yeah, then when we started the company, we started working with many technologies, but fast we noticed that that didn't scale because we needed to have every best practices of every technology. So we started working with Flutter because we saw at that moment a technology that could allow us to work on any platform. At that time, it was only mobile, but nowadays we work with mobile and web, and we are trying to incorporate it also to desktop projects. And yeah, we started like specializing on that technology. So I guess that we have all of the history that was happening throughout the years, right? We were migrating all of our projects to, I don't know, Flutter 2.0 when it was released. Nowadays, like to Flutter 3.0. So yeah, it was kind of fun because we were learning with the technology, all of the decisions, all of the libraries that were like appearing, like the whole block versus provider, and then Riverpod and so on. So we were learning with the technology itself. So it was a fun journey so far.
So how did you guys first hear about Flutter to begin with? So you started using Flutter like when you started your consulting company, is that right?
Yeah, it was almost at the same time, but it was really kind of like looking for technologies that could like cross platform technologies, and we searched and we started trying Flutter really early, so we didn't know even like if it was becoming a thing. It was like on 2018. So really, really early. And then we started getting more information about Flutter. And I think that the breaking point here was when we decided to test this technology, Flutter, with a real client. Because at the moment we were like basically experimenting in some not easy projects. There were difficult projects, but there were like internal projects. It was like building a product that then the product didn't succeed. But betting with a real client, it was important because if we fail, it won't be like a good image for us because we were working with real clients. So whenever we started working with that client, we realized that this technology is like, at least for us, was like something that could be sell, and that the client itself was really happy. So that was like maybe 2019. And then we decided to fully focus on Flutter because of that, because we weren't able to apply all of the best practices across all of the technologies that we were using. We were using like also React, Node.js, and a couple of other technologies. We started migrating the whole team to only Flutter. That was a really good decision because we started incorporating all of the best practices in Flutter, and from that moment to now, like, we are using only Flutter.
But how did Flutter come underneath your radar, right? How did it pop up? Was it on Hacker News, or how did it come up in your?
Yeah, if I had to be honest, I really don't know the exact moment. I remember that, as I told you, I was working with native technologies, Android and iOS, and especially I was focusing on iOS. And I have the problem that basically whenever I needed to make updates, I didn't have like the hot reload that we normally use in Flutter. So I guess it was like scrolling in the internet that I downloaded by literally accident the beta release of Flutter, and I started playing around. I couldn't believe like what was happening. Like, I was able to mainly see all the changes that I was doing in Dart almost at real time. It was like I was also back then working with web technologies, and the whole working with web is like you write code and you see it instantly, right? It's like the way to code, I think. So by doing that in Flutter, I was really excited, and that was the moment I realized it had potential. I mean, it was different from what I was experienced with native technologies. Then we started like getting more information, and we realized that it was backed by Google and all that. So it was almost by merely accident and searching in internet, but it wasn't like a really thought process. Okay, I see this article in internet and I'm going to test the tool. It was like I got the tool and I tested. Yeah.
Okay, maybe we can start getting over to DartFrog, right? So you guys are mainly focusing on Flutter work, right? But DartFrog, it's definitely not a Flutter thing.
Right. Yeah.
It's a Dart thing, right? So the only commonality is the same language, but it's not. To me, when I program in Flutter and if I program with Dart, I feel like they're two different things, even though they're not. But like the way you program is, I feel it's quite different because it's much more, you're looking at the design, right? As opposed to when you're programming, you're looking at the architecture, the style, etc. At first glance, I think. So, how did you hear about DartFrog and what were your first impressions of it?
Okay, so maybe, yeah, I can go back to the question like why we're talking about DartFrog, and because we are specializing in Flutter, right? And we are talking about a Dart backend framework. So basically, I mean, even though we specialize in Flutter, we realize, okay, every app nowadays needs a backend, right? We can't escape and do only front-end development, because like every app needs to connect to a cloud, right? We only experienced one single app that didn't have to connect to a backend because it was full it was really specific, and we embed a database in the app, but that doesn't scale for many apps, right? So basically, we need to have knowledge of backend alternatives. Nowadays, like the whole team also specialize in Firebase, which is a backend as a service. So we also know like this service to interact with different things that might be more backend, and also in some cases we write cloud functions with TypeScript. So I mean, we put ourselves as Flutter experts, but we also provide like backend solutions, right? And we also use the whole GCP ecosystem. So what I'm trying to say is like, okay, what would be like the best of both worlds for us, like to start writing more of the cloud functions that we write currently in TypeScript in Dart, for example. And in the case of these frameworks, I see that we can quickly start migrating to a full stack Dart solution. So we only manage one language at the end of the day. So that's why we initially started seeing alternatives such as DartFrog, mainly because of the language, because we found ourselves like writing backend code, in this case, like really cloud functions. But yeah, we aim to have everything, why not, in Dart, right, and manage a single language. That I think is the ultimately, I mean, because as I explained, we also work with other teams in the staffing modality. So we also have knowledge on GraphQL or gRPC or REST APIs. But all of the pains we'll have, I mean, one of the pains we normally experience as front-end developers is syncing up both teams. Not only the teams, also there's a real whole. I mean, if you start reusing as much as code as possible between both teams, front end and back end, that will be really useful. In this case, if you invest time on working on DartFrog, you will be having the same language and reusing the same models. So that will be really efficient. I mean, there are other alternatives that do that. I name it, for example, gRPC. But yeah, we started like investing more time in understanding this tool for that, because maybe in the future we will have a real project with DartFrog and a REST API, and we will be able to reuse as much as code as possible, and not define like the models in the backend and then synchronize the team of the front end. Okay, these are the models, and whenever it change, that affects the front end, the normal pains that every front end team has, right?
Yeah, I see what you mean. I always hear the argument about, okay, we should always use Node.js because, we're going to be writing a front end with some type of JavaScript technology, because obviously that's the only language that runs natively on the front end. And then so they just say Node.js, we can keep it simple that way, right? Do you really think that's actually a benefit to use the same language in front and back? I mean, because there's some things you can do in the back end you cannot do in the front, and vice versa. So yes, you can share some things between the two, but at the same time, you may be getting confused about what you can do where. No.
Yeah, I mean, it's always depend on the project, right? I mean, there are certain type of languages that are better suited for backend than. I mean, you don't have to force the language. You have to find the correct architecture and the languages that are more suited for the problem that you are trying to solve. But I mean, in most of the project we work, that will be a real benefit, because yeah, all the developers already know, like because they know Flutter, they know Dart, and if they have knowledge about backend development, it will be really a benefit to start sharing everything in the same code, in the same language, right? So yeah, I see a real benefit about that, because you have to repeat, especially the models and the whole thinking behind defining all of the models. and you just do it in one place. And yeah, I mean, if we go for a full stack app with Flutter and DartFrog in this case, you will be able to reuse a lot of things, right? And and all of the developers will know, okay, this is the backend, but it is in the language I know, so I can scroll and see around, and I can understand why they made these decisions because I'm reading like dark code, right? So yeah.
Now, that's a good question, right? Because I could say from my side for sure that I quote unquote learned Flutter before I actually learned.
Right. Yeah.
So I cannot say that, okay, I can definitely use this. Well, now I can use it, but at the time, I actually don't think I could use it so much in the back end because when I built my Flutter apps at the beginning, I was just looking at everything very visual and a little bit of logic here and there. Now, a full-fledged Dart app, I don't know. I just feel like it could be difficult for some people, even though it's the same language. But when you program something in Flutter, you have different concerns if you program something with DartFrog, no?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that it's a really normal thing to start learning Dart because of Flutter. And whenever you are learning Flutter, for example, you want to, I don't know, learn about all the widgets that it has, try to see visual things, learning how it runs on iOS or Android or web or wherever, rather than study the language itself. Whenever you start learning Flutter, you start discovering like Dart and its features and why it's so powerful. So I think that is a normal path, but yeah, in this case, I think that DartFrog, um, I think like the current Dart possibilities in the backend were like really intimidating, maybe because if you go for, I don't know, shelf, you have like a lot of boilerplate to write, and all of the code is like mainly doing things that are setting up the server and all things. But in the case of DartFrog, it might be like a lower barrier for the Flutter developer to start playing around. And in other cases also, like if you go for, I don't know, GraphQL or gRPC, those are really intimidating. Maybe this one is like really easy to use and start playing around. But yeah, totally. I mean, I think like it's a normal thing that people start knowing more Dart because of Flutter. Yeah, and whenever you are in a, I don't know, in a tutorial, the first thing is to learn the language. But normally everyone skip that and start playing around with Flutter first, and then start realize, okay, Dart features are like this, and we have to take care about this. But yeah.
Now, that's interesting. You're talking about Shelf, right? Because I'm not sure about DartFrog, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's also based on Shelf. It must be, right?
Yeah. The whole framework is built on top of Shelf. So even if you start enter into the functions predefined in DartFrog, you will see that underneath there are Shelf functions. So if you have like a really solid experience on Shelf, it will be like a higher layer on top of Shelf. So maybe at this point, like if you know Shelf, you will have like more customization maybe, but in this case, I think it will facilitate the whole process of interacting with Shelf.
Now, you and I both know what is Shelf, but I'm guessing that a lot of people don't know what is Shelf because mostly, I mean, we're Flutter, right? When you're in Flutter, you're stuck in the Flutter community. Shelf is not something you usually play around with if you're in Flutter.
Of course.
If you're a Dart fanatic, yes. So maybe you can give the audience a quick recap about what is Shelf.
Yeah, of course. So basically, Shelf it is a package that basically allows you to create REST APIs, or even it has integration. I recently tested with WebSockets, so it allows you to create servers and to serve like an API, right? So I think I wouldn't say that it's low-level programming. It's like it might sound intimidating because you have to manage like the server and like more abstraction concepts that are more abstract, right? But it basically allows you to create to do Dart in the backend. And yeah, what we are trying to say is that DartFrog is built on top of this package, so it is a layer of abstraction that facilitates working with shelf underneath, right? And defining all of the routes. If you're building a REST API, a normal REST API, or nowadays DartFrog doesn't support WebSockets, but I think it's on the roadmap. So maybe we are going to see probably that in the future. So yeah, that will be like basically Shelf and DartFrog. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the documentation for Shelf itself, so Shelf, if you go to pub.dev, you can look up Shelf. Shelf also has a lot of different packages too.
Yeah.
They have it's very basic. It's not super basic, but it's pretty basic in terms of what's there.
Right.
Looks like you can have a pipeline. You can add middlewares to it. You can add handlers to everything. So you can kind of see these things like middleware and handlers are actually being used in DartFrog. They actually use specific words.
Right.
And they say that they're basically inspired by Connect for Node.js or Rack for Ruby. And Rack is kind of like a standard of how you make or how you can use, how do you say that? It's like a standard of how you would write a Ruby web application.
Right.
I don't even know how to even say that, but basically, if you look at the description for Shelf, this is probably the easiest way to say it. Is that it creates an easy way that you can compose web servers or parts of web servers. So you can say a Shelf compliant web server you can make, and then you can add it to your system. So say like you have your DartFrog app, and then somebody wrote some kind of admin interface, you could just add it to your system because they're Shelf compliant. Something like that. That's basically how it all works. They have lots of stuff like a router, static file hosting,
right,
all this kind of stuff. And basically every kind of backend system that I'm aware of for Dart uses Shelf underneath, just like ServerPod, obviously DartFrog.
That's right. Yeah, there are other alternatives, not only like DartFrog. There's also ServerPod. I mean, yeah, it's a matter of like trying like the tools and see what you are more comfortable with. And yeah, the all of the concepts are really repeated across every framework. In this case, DartFrog also focus on routes, middlewares, and yeah, also testing. So yeah, and dependency injection and static files, right? And hosting static files. So yeah, I think it's a matter of like, yeah, if you are intimidated by Shelf, maybe you can test these tools that are like easier. And yep, but the concepts are really the same. They took inspiration from other tools as well. We mentioned Next.js and Express from Node.js, but that's only to know how to solve the whole problem. In the case of the routes, like doing like the whole thing that Next.js did, and yeah, in the case of static files as well, hosting static files. And in the case of, for example, middlewares, this is a concept that is really repeated across also our technologies. Next.js has also middlewares, and the whole going back to what I was saying, like it is like similar to Flutter in some way, is because when you do dependency injection, it's really like similar of doing dependency injection in Flutter. I mean, if you know this concept in like being a front-end developer, you need to know this concept is really important. And being a developer, right, it's really important. But the whole passing providers through the request context in DartFrog is really similar to using the build context in Flutter. So you can access those providers by using provider.read, and you have access to the whole logic that that provider exposes in any route that you want. So the concept of middleware in DartFrog is basically try to have a logic before or after a route is executed. So you can check all like important things. The most used would be, for example, authentication, right? You don't want to repeat all of the logic in all of the routes. So you put a middleware, you determine if the user is authenticated or not, and then you redirect to the on request function, and then you can like I know, log different things after the route is executed. And at the same time, you can inject different providers to your routes in DartFrog. Also, a provider is also like a middleware, right? You inject something lazily because maybe you don't want to use it in every route. Whenever you start using it, that will create the provider and you will be able to use it. And you can inject, for example, different data sources to your endpoints, so you can retrieve like the data from, I don't know, like a database, an in-memory like map or something. So yeah, the whole DartFrog framework, it resembles a lot of the concept of shelf, other technologies, but also you can find similarities between like Flutter regular development.
Yeah, that's I don't know what to say about this, but I found it very interesting. It's basically, I could say, for most things it's very much zero configuration, and I find that to be both refreshing and nice, but at the same time frustrating and confusing, because I'm so used to everything being very explicit for most frameworks. Even if you have a generator, it does most of that for you, but like I have questions like, well, what if I want to use a middleware sometimes for some routes, but not for all routes? I don't see a way to do that so easily. There maybe is. I think you maybe have to create the main.dart file, then you can add them in. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I mean, about middlewares, I've tried like to use different middleware for different routes, and you can define a global middleware that applies to all routes, but you can define also independent middlewares to each independent route, right? So if you create a middleware inside the specific route folder, you will be able to apply that logic to that specific route. Uh, I guess that, I don't know, like if there will be like uh, if you will have to be really explicit on which routes do you want to use the global middleware and not, because maybe that global middleware applies to every route. But yeah, I mean that's whenever you start like abstracting all of the configuration, you start losing that flexibility in some cases. I don't know if that would be a specific problem, but it could happen. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's definitely something I want to do is like maybe have like a top level, try to read a cookie and then like grab the user. And then bottom level, like I could say, if there's a user attached, then continue. Or if there's no user that's been provided, then, eject them, right? I want to be able to do that at the middleware level so that when I get down to the controller, I could just focus on what I need to do because I know that what I want is there already. But it seems like they don't have that part yet. That's what I understand.
Yeah, I mean, you have the global middleware, so you'll be able to perform that logic in the middleware. What I'm not sure is like if you will be able to determine which of the endpoints you want to apply the middleware. I've tested with the normal use case, and yeah, but I guess that will be simple to have the logic in the middleware itself, because not every uh, endpoint should be like authenticated. There are some endpoints that you will need it even though you're not authenticated. So I guess that was thought when building the middleware thing. Like you will be able to see which type of request they are trying to get access, and maybe if it is a route that needs that logic, we will basically, yeah, see if the user is authenticated. And in other cases, like we let them pass because it's not a protected route, right? In the case of a middleware that is like basically trying to authenticate the user. But but yeah, I know if like that uh, answer your question. I mean, probably I think that it will be something that they thought about it.
Yeah, basically, it seems like they're trying to go for as much as possible for it to basically like abstract an actual router, right? So
Right, right.
it's very interesting that you use folders and files to create routes, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, how can I selectively apply middleware? How can I selectively apply, like, if I want to make a really long route that's very complicated, I can't, because I'd have to make a bunch of folders and stuff. And it's interesting. Like, I don't know. I need to play around with it to really see it. But I just don't. Yeah, it's interesting. That's like the big thing. Is it's very interesting. It's also interesting that they don't have like they don't try to add so much stuff, such as like an actual like database, right? If I start this, like, if you've probably done, I mean, basically you've probably done Ruby on Rails or something similar, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Where you start your project and they say, okay, you can choose which database you want, or we're going to start with SQLite or PostgreSQL or something like that. You don't get that from DartFrog. It's basically kind of API first, and very much like, okay, you want to create a route? Sure, create a folder if you need that, or just create the file. And if you want to make dynamic input, you have to use bracket syntax. Okay, this is interesting.
yeah. You have to. Yeah, I mean, I think like the whole routing system could be tedious in some routes, but at the same time, it's trying to limiting yourself to like do routing in the standard way, right? Because I've seen like so many backends that have different endpoints that are, for example, I don't know, get to dos, and that's the name of the endpoint. That is not like really REST, and yeah, in this case, you will be sure that if you create a file that is named, or a folder that is named to dos, like you will have all of the implementation of the REST endpoints like in the way they are meant to do, right? And you will like determine if there is a get request or post or put or delete or any other, but maybe in limiting the user to define the whole structure by like the file system, we will be seeing like more restful like approaches in the correct way. And yeah, in the case of like a nested route, you will see, okay, I have to put this nested because like this is what REST tell me, right? You could potentially add like, I don't know, some linter rules to check if you're using REST in the correct way, so you can limit all the folders to like the I don't know, like the structure that REST suggests. And in the case of like dynamic routes, yeah, you will be able to add the brackets, so you also have that really easy setup. In that case, you will need to implement the onRequest function, but with an additional parameter that will be the dynamic ID, right? But yeah, I know, like I feel like, yeah, I got your point that maybe it's like can be really tedious, but at the same time it can facilitate like all of these standards that we have in REST APIs to be like really straightforward, because if they are defining well the folder structure, they will know that you're using REST with all of the standards.
Hmm.
In the case of the database, I know that, I mean, what we have to understand of this tool is that it's really recent. I guess that they went for an approach of like releasing what they had at that moment. We maybe in the future we are going to see like other things on top of this, but I feel like they were really fast on like delivering this tool, right? So we can start getting used to. And yeah, in those cases you will need to import your or use whatever database you feel comfortable with, but you are totally free to do it. It's not like they are trying to not being flexible in that space, right? But yeah, probably in the future they will add that support, or we are going to start seeing more solutions around DartFrog that use that certain database. I was playing around and try and really identify that the very first problem is that you need to set up really easy when you start like making your endpoints like your normal CRUD operations. you always need to set up like the whole route with the dynamic route and the endpoint, the file that is called index, so you have access to the actual entity and endpoints. And inside that, you need like the on request method and all of the if else that are determined if the endpoint is like a get, a put, or a post or delete. So I built a brick in Mason that really speed up the process of creating the actual route with all of the HTTP method. So it's really, I think like even though they build the framework, we need to start seeing like how people use the framework, which database are going to use, where they are going to deploy it, and maybe we are going to see like things, solutions, and in this case, like as I mentioned, like a brick built in Mason to speed up the whole process of creating routes in DartFrog, right?
Yeah, I was just taking a look at the roadmap, right? Like you mentioned, WebSocket support's coming in. That I'm interested to see how that would look like within Dart, let alone
Right.
DartFrog. Dart API client generation, that's basically how to consume the API rather than how to
Right.
kick stuff out, right? Dart client. Open API documentation generation, that's going to be awesome. I think that's really quite useful. Testing library specifically, they have testing, right? Because when you generate your DartFrog project, you get some testing out there. It does seem very bare bones and very simple, so I'd like to see what that looks like too. CLI new command to generate new routes and middleware. Health check endpoint, that sounds interesting. I'm curious what that actually looks like and what's going to be in there. And also, this is also pretty cool too. VS Code IntelliJ support for DartFrog. I think that would be really exciting. And then a CLI deploy command. I also thought it was a little bit strange too that in the deploy section they don't just cover like if you want to just deploy it to like a computer within your own network or EC2, etc. That they only cover, at least I'm sure you could do it, but they only cover Google Cloud Run, App Runner, and DigitalOcean App Platform, which I think are all CLI Docker based solutions, right? Where you push your code and it'll just do everything for you.
Right. Yeah, I think like this is not a coincidence. I mean, the DartFrog, when you run the Dart build command, also it provides you a Dockerfile, so you can deploy your container in whatever solution you like. So I think that's why they probably started with the solutions that use Docker. But yeah, it will be. I mean, if you know how to run a Docker deploy, it will be really easy to like have it in your EC2 instance. I mean, I think that the whole point of covering those ones is that it's really straightforward and you can have it like instantly, like not instantly, but with little configuration, you can like deploy with a single command in the case of Cloud Run. Probably they started with those one because of that. But yeah, it should be fine if you. I mean, probably it would be like more a Docker deploy in that case because as I explained, like this is like it provides out of the box the Docker file, so the whole deployment is easier. But yeah, the roadmap is looking really great. I'm also thinking like how would be the integration with WebSockets. I want to see that in action. But the whole API client generation should be really easy. I mean, you're limiting the developer to how they create routes, so like you have like total control on how they approach that, so you can create your client really easy.
Yeah, I was just taking a look. I found your brick.
Yeah, yeah. I uploaded it recently to BrickHub. I think I call it DartFrog REST Frog. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It is basically like a really simple brick just to uh, create a REST and all of the REST endpoints for a certain route. But if you want to create like the to-do endpoints, you don't need to create everything by hand. You run the command, and that will basically create the file structure and also the on request function that really separates between like the if you are if they are hitting like the get or the put or the post or delete, right? And in that case, it redirects to the handler. That is when you have to start writing your code. But if you use that brick, you will be basically speeding up all of the process, not only with DartFrog, but also like the thing that you have to set up as a boilerplate. And yeah, probably I know you could extend also that brick to, because all of the if you extend that brick, for example, to use a provider and to like try to provide a data source and all that, it will be really easy to start building things. In general, all of the endpoints are really you have like really easy endpoints that are really straightforward, that you need to basically perform authentication and return a JSON, right? So yeah, that could really speed up certain things.
The other thing I wish that DartFrog had was like if I could actually, it seems like they're really focusing only on API. I really wish they could also generate like full on templates and everything else I wanted to do. But I guess there must be some kind of templating library within Dart community, you know?
Yeah, I mean, in the DartFrog documentation, you have like examples. So you can scroll basic tutorials, the Hello World tutorial, the counter, and to-dos. So, so yeah, maybe like there is a hint on how to properly use the framework, but yeah, I agree that they're like right now focusing only in APIs, right? They are not including WebSockets or even gRPC or things like that. But yeah, I think it's a good starting point, so you don't feel like really overwhelmed by using the tool, right? But yeah, I mean, the whole point. What I see more potential is like try to reuse all of the models and probably yeah, have that nice integration of a HTTP client that if it can be auto generated, it will be super cool. But if not, it's okay. In the same project of your Flutter app, so you can have like everyone working on the same models, right? And you can because it's there, you can use JSON serializable and all of the equitable and all of the libraries we're used to as Flutter developers. And yeah, this is an approach that I think is super cool because I've seen these approaches, for example, in gRPC, where you have like share protobuf and even the services, so you don't have to write your own clients or models, and really speed ups the whole process, right? Of delivering a new feature, like the backend team working on a new feature and the front end team instantly having those changes, uh, really speed up the whole development process of everyone.
Yeah, I was just taking a look and it looks like uh, the DartFrog package is actually taking a look at supporting HTML templating at some point. Not sure when. Somebody requested back in June. Last comment it was middle September. So it looks like there's something that they want to do, but they haven't thought about when they want to do that and how they want to do it.
Right. I mean, yeah. I think like the tool Mason is like uh, available for anyone who needs to create a template. And yeah, it's really easy. In this case, I demonstrate how to use a template for routes, but you could also have a template for yeah, something more complex. The tools are out there, and that's really helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot about DartFrog, and it's interesting to hear about where some of the history kind of comes from. I think we're just about out of time.
Okay.
Is there anything that you wanted to say before we head off for the night? For the well, not just for the night, for the episode. I guess I could say for me, it's for the night.
Yeah, I mean, it was really excited to be here. I was really excited. And yeah, I really enjoyed to talk about software. You know, I mean, even though I said we specialize in Flutter, I'm really in touch with different approaches in other technologies. So yeah, I really enjoy this conversation. And yeah, I hope to be here in the future and continue talking about anything else. So yeah, it was nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's good to meet you too. Maybe we'll have you back again to talk about another topic or talk about more about DartFrog. But thanks for putting this on my radar. Like I looked at it today finally because of this episode, and I'm both impressed but not confused, but I would say skeptical, right? Because of the
Skeptical.
method. Yeah, because of the way they're doing it. It's totally different for me. I've never. Most things I work with are very explicit in how things kind of work. This one is like there's a lot of what they call like magic, right? This is what people used to say about Rails and stuff. So magical, but this one's even more magical because it's like zero configuration. It just kind of works, which could be good for beginners, but at the same time, for somebody like me, an old developer like me, I kind of want to see how the heck is this thing working.
Yeah, I know. I mean, yeah, probably for you that already knew Shelf, it is like you need to be skeptical. But you have to imagine in the cases that developers that didn't know Shelf, they have like a framework that it allows you to like enter like with a lower barrier, right? And then I think that they are going to get interested more in, for example, what is happening underneath. There is in Shelf, there is in this concept, and maybe I will search for WebSockets because we don't have support yet in DartFrog and all this. So yeah, I think it is a nice abstraction, and yeah, it's worth to start playing around just to see if it can speed up certain projects, right? And yeah, motivate developers to like also encourage developers to start doing full stack Dart products. Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, and with that, thank you for your time, and like I said, hopefully have you back again soon.
Yeah, sure. Thanks to you. It was really great to be here.